you can write something and stick it on the shelf or stick it on the mirror. But if there's no power in that for you, then it's not a magic bullet. But it's when we're daily looking at that, declaring it, believing it, dedicating time to reaching it, we're upskilling ourselves in the things we need to do to get there. We're making that a priority and a living thing in our life. That's when vision becomes powerful.
Welcome to the Sidehustle Lounge. If you're looking for flexible ways to earn income, grow your mindset, and live the lifestyle you've always dreamed of, you're in the right place. So lower the lights, grab your favorite beverage, and join your host, founder of NotaryCoach.com and Amazon best-selling author of Sign and Thrive, How to Make Six Figures as a Mobile Notary and Loan Signing Agent, Bill Soroka.
Cheers, and welcome to my next guest today, Michael Rowell. He's the owner, chief photocopier, chief dishwasher of Empowered Nation Consulting. He's also the author of The Leadership Upgrade, 10 Keys to Becoming the Leader Your World is Waiting For. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Bill, thank you so much for having me. I wish I'd found something like you guys about 30 years ago when I was working deep in the bureaucracy of government, and I had my side hustle multi-level marketing business going. And people would ask me, what did you do last night? And I'd say, I'd sent out 30 emails to prospects. And they looked at me like I was some sort of alien or something, like, stay in the 9 to 5, stay in your lane, don't go out looking for anything else. So I feel like I found my people once I found this show and your community. So thanks so much for having me on. It's a real privilege.
Well, that's so great to hear. I love that the seed was planted so long ago, and you know exactly what this is all about. And it sounds like you've held onto your dream. I'm sure it changed faces many times, like it does for so many of us. But you held on to that, and now you've started your own company, consulting company, and you've become an author. So I'd like to start right there at the book, Michael, because that's what brought us together.
Sure.
Is this book, Leadership Upgrade. And I had the privilege of being one of your early readers, beta readers or launch team readers. And I knew this book was going to be special. And I'm just going to say it. I think this book should be required reading for every 8th grader in the world, because this what you teach, these 10 key lessons, is not just about business. It's just about being a better human. And I love that you chose the word keys, 10 keys, because it truly does unlock opportunities. This is what makes the world tick. It's what makes people feel special, and it's what makes big visions come to life in the world. So thank you for writing this. This is really powerful.
Oh, look, thank you so much for that summary. That's a real honor to have you say that about the book and the material. It's really been kind of a 30-year project for me, I guess. And the fact that, it settled on those 10 keys, I guess they came about because through my journey of life and the leadership roles I had and family and watching other leaders and watching people at work and in the community and that sort of thing, probably about 30 years ago, I just started taking notes about things that I observed and things that really had power and things that seemed really like foundational concepts. So these are the 10 things that for me, I keep coming back to. And I know for me in my own life that if I'm not really functioning well in one of these 10 keys, it can really, I notice the impact in my own life, my own progress. And if I'm doing them well, I also notice that sort of even just at home with the family or in my workplace or in whatever else I'm doing. So these are kind of took a long time to settle on, and there was a lot thrown out on the table to start with, and it took a while to sort them into these kind of 10 issues. But I guess ultimately these are what I see as like a real framework that we can build, firstly, a life on, and then that flows into our leadership and that sort of thing. Because we what we are in private is what we are in public. So if I'm a really kind of selfish person at home, then I'll be a selfish leader wherever I am. So that's kind of the concept of it.
Well, I love that you're talking about that. First, I don't know how you boiled them down to these 10, but I think you did a really good job, because there's lots of characteristics and qualities in leadership, but I think you nailed it. You got the foundational piece with these 10. But what you just alluded to as well was authenticity and being the real deal, being who you are behind the scenes as well as when you're on stage. And I think that's a critical part of leadership that is oftentimes missing, no matter whether it's a solopreneur on the road or trying to build a business in one way, but lacking that integrity with themselves behind the scenes, in government leadership and corporate leadership, people trying to pull their energies, trying to be two different faces. And it makes life more difficult for that person. But I think as human beings, don't you think we pick up on that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look, I think that's a great point. And, at the end of the day, we only really have there's only one of us. We can't split ourselves into a work us and a home us. And we only have one heart and one soul. And wherever we are, that's the one we've got with us. So, I've found for my own life, sometimes I can perform, in inverted commas, really well at work. And I can be patient, and I can be a great listener and a great communicator, and all these wonderful things at work, but get home and just totally blow it. and you sort of realize, wow, I'm still growing in those areas. And as you say, it might be something that I'm aspiring to be, but sometimes there's still like an immaturity in my own life about growing into those things. So I think that's a great point that you make, that we tend to take ourselves wherever we're at, into whatever environment we go into.
Yeah, there's no escape from us, right? Well, and I think that I think it's important that we give ourselves grace. You just said it. We're constantly learning and growing, and we're becoming. This isn't a destination, right? I don't think you get to a certain point and you're like, I made it. I no longer have to grow. I never have to figure anything else out. It's just this constant process. And give yourself some grace along the way.
Well, I think you made this point in your podcast with Phil Shannon, I think was his name.
Oh yeah.
And I think the way you said that was better than I tried to explain it in the book, was about we're in this process of becoming, and no one comes ready-made, and the subtitle of the book is 10 Keys to Become the Leader Your World is Waiting For, because exactly as you say, we are a work in progress. We're always a work in progress. So the power to become is really one of the most powerful dynamics we can capture as people, because we may not be good at something today, or we may not have a capacity to function in a particular area today. But if we can capture the power to become, then we can grow into that tomorrow. And it might take 30 years. I know for me, 30 years ago, I would be a cringing mess on the floor in the fetal position at the thought of doing this podcast. So I'm not a natural public speaker, but that's something that I've grown into, and it's something that I'm continuing to grow into. And I love the fact that Phil, on that last podcast, he talked about the fact that he had a business and, it was going well, and then he had some hard times and he sort of went in a different direction, but he came back to it and he rebuilt it. And I thought, wow, that's a guy who's captured the dynamic of being able to become. Because I know people that have money or success or certain things, but then for whatever reason have lost it. And I can see they don't have the internal capacity to recreate that. So they sort of, they don't have those dynamics. I think that is a really important dynamic that you spoke about.
that brings up a really great question. Do you think that leaders, whether leaders of self or leaders of others, are born or created?
Without a doubt, leaders are made. Nobody comes ready-made to the role. And everybody, I'm convinced, everybody can become a really powerful leader in their world. And, that might be in their home. That might be as the prime minister of a nation or the president of a nation. But whatever their world is, everybody can grow and become the leader that world is looking for. So it might be, the coordinator of a community group or something like that. And look, nobody arrives ready-made. I certainly have not. And it's been a real growth journey for me to move into better levels of leadership, I guess you could say. And I'm still so much on that journey, like I'm barely down the road. So I think with the right input, with the right attitude, everybody can learn and become that leader.
I know you talked about this a little bit in the book, but to me, it always goes down to my vision, like what it is that I'm trying to create or the impact that I'm trying to have on my world. Because like you, I love that you said that 30 years ago, you would have been nervous to come on a podcast like this. I'm the same way. Like I could be in my cave as an introvert and never be out. Yeah, I still have to, I have to meditate and pump myself up for these types of exchanges on a podcast. Even today, like I had to,
Sure.
I do that because I have to get in the right space, and I got to remember why I'm doing this,
Wow.
what we're talking about. And even when I'm totally looking forward to hanging out with you because I love your book, I still have to have that conversation with myself and remind myself of the vision of that and what I'm trying to create here.
Oh, look, absolutely. And I think that's such a powerful key, is that concept of building our life out of our vision, because it's almost like, there's kind of a natural, not to be negative, but there's kind of a natural limitation in the environment around our life, and even a natural decay. You take a bite of an apple, you leave it on the bench, it goes brown because there's just something in the environment that's kind of affecting it negatively. And I think as soon as we set our sights on a vision or a goal, there's something in the environment that tends to be working against us reaching that. And a lot of it is inside us, right? It's my own fears and my own anxieties, and it's my own limitations of, gosh, who am I to do this, and my own thinking and all this sort of stuff. And that's kind of a default position. And that's something in the book we talk about is breakthrough thinking. So we might think, oh gosh, look at that person. They've got it all together. It's all smooth sailing for them. I'm not like that, so it's never going to be like that for me. But everyone, like that old saying, most of us is like the rest of us. Everyone's got their own limiting thoughts and challenges. And if we're not actively connecting with that vision that you speak about and really building out of that, by default, the environment kind of closes in around us and the limitation sets in and the negativity sits in. And it's like, as you say, almost a regular kind of almost daily event. We've got to break through that and get back out into the why and into the vision of what we're working towards.
Yeah, it's so huge. And speaking of that, dreams aren't always easy. Writing a book, I know, is not always easy. Why did you decide to take that on? Why now?
Yeah, sure. Look, I guess over that time that I mentioned at the start about just sort of observations and taking notes and that sort of thing, I started to keep settling on these keys that I thought, wow, this is really powerful stuff. And in some of the coaching that I was doing with people and that sort of thing, and I really wanted to get that condensed and into one place. So, I had 1,000 sticky notes and manila folders and notes on the back of napkins, and I thought I've got to get this into one kind of space, because I was really passionate about the fact that these types of truths that you talk about, teaching to 8th graders, wow, what a concept. Wouldn't that change the world? You don't learn this stuff at school. But gosh, if we did, I tell you what, my life would be different. So, I'm pushing 50 now and really sort of capturing these things, but I'm teaching these to my daughter who's 11 because I want her to be empowered with this sort of concepts that can really shape a life now and build towards them now. So part of the reason I did the book was to get the message to as many people as I could, because I can only be in one place at one time, and hopefully with the book more people can have access to it, and hopefully it might help them in their journey as well.
It's a beautiful vision. That was going to exactly be my next question, is what do you hope this book will do for the world?
Well, I think the world is, in a really interesting place. And I think the issue of leadership has never been more critical. And it's always been critical because, leadership changes the world. And that classic saying that everything rises and falls on leadership. And, I believe that now more so than I did 25 years ago when I first heard that quote. So I think, if we build well, if we build our own individual life well, that translates into families, that translates into communities and workplaces, and that translates into the world. So I think the issue of leadership is a really critical one, and it's an area that I think is really misunderstood because we think leaders, so we think of presidents and CEOs and that sort of thing. But I tell you what, there's no more powerful leader than the parent at home, or someone in a school, or in their own world, impacting people in a positive way in their own sphere of influence. These people are just as powerful and just as important to change the world as anyone else in any other position.
I love that you're talking about that, because I think there's this distance between many people and leaders. So do you think, first, do you even have to have followers to lead, or is there a different kind of leadership?
Yeah, I think the concept of leadership can potentially be that kind of traditional, I'm a leader because I'm in charge of people. But, some of the greatest leaders that I've seen in my community are the ones that serve others the best. And they're kind of leaders because they put themselves last and they serve everyone. Or they serve their vision, or they serve a cause, or they serve other people. Sometimes they serve other people's visions. So sometimes the best followers are the best leaders because they're so sold out for growing someone else's work or someone else's message. By default, they become leaders of those areas. And so I think, we do need to be connected to people. I mean, if you're a leader and you're not connected to anyone, you're not leading, you just went for a walk because there's no one following you. But we do need to be connected to people, but I don't think we necessarily need to have followers. I just think we need to be connected to others. And, leadership is about influence. And if we're influencing people, then, really we're a leader to those people.
Great point. What do you say to someone who is listening and thinking, I have no desire of being a leader, I'm not a leader? What do you say to them?
You're well qualified. There's always a little red flag with the people that must be the leader, and they want to be in charge and they want to be in control, because potentially that's a problem because there can only be one leader in kind of any situation. So, oftentimes what we really need is great followers, and we need people who can capture a vision. Like I could say on one hand, I'm a leader, but I'm also a follower. And I think learning to be a great follower is an absolute prerequisite to being a great leader, because it's there that we learn to, serve other people or serve someone's vision, or put others first. And we sort of learn to put our own agenda to one side and our own preferences. Like, I've got opinions. Like you asked me about something, I could give you an opinion. But at the end of the day, if someone's in charge and they say this is what we're going to do, then I've got to put that opinion to one side and go, righto, I'm on board, 100%, let's do it. So, it's a great training exercise to become a leader. And if you don't want to be a leader, fantastic. The world just got a lot easier, because on a team or in a group or an organization, if you're not constantly wanting to challenge the leader or take the leader in another direction or whatever, then you're first-class team material. We need more people like you.
I'm sure that's going to be very comforting to many people. Now, something that you just mentioned, though, people who are striving for leader for maybe different reasons, unhealthy reasons. Maybe the egos gets in the way. I would imagine that through the years, 25, 30 years of experiencing leadership and coaching, that you've seen some examples of poor leadership as well, too. Did you, does that inspire you to help write a book like this?
Oh, absolutely. You've absolutely nailed it, Bill. You've seen straight through my disguise. No, look, it is a really spot on point, because that is actually a real key motivation. And what I wanted to do was provide people a plumb line and a foundation stone and a level and a gauge, whatever you want to call it, like a point of truth in time that they can refer to and get some sort of feedback for themselves against this plumb line. So, builders use a plumb line. They set their string and that they drop a line down to the ground from a height with a weight on the end, and they know that's the plumb line, that's straight. So when we deviate off that, we know we're moving off the wrong track. So really what part of the book is all about is providing a plumb line for people to gauge and assess their own leadership. Because as you say, I've seen some really bad leadership, and I've seen the devastating impact that it has on people. And that really bothers me when people are in positions of authority, when people are in positions of power. And look, as soon as we're a leader of anything, we are by default in a position of authority over people. And that is potentially a really challenging place to be, because people assign a certain level of weight to an authority figure's opinions or views or behaviours towards them. So, I think if ever we're in that position, we need to be so super careful and so super aware of the impact that we're having on the people around us and that we're connected to. And when we're not, I've seen the impact and experienced the impact myself of bad leadership. And I know that the weight that can carry, in a life, and you don't just leave that at work. You don't just leave that on the basketball court when you finish playing and the coach has said something to you. You take that home and it sits with you. Like, words have power, actions and behaviours towards us have power. So when we're in a position of authority and we misuse that, or we damage people from that position, it's really not good. So a lot of the book is about, be red flag, be really careful about how you're dealing with the people connected to you when you're in that position.
I think that's such powerful advice too. And I think when you're elevated to a position of leadership or influence, as you mentioned, sometimes the most off the cuff words have tremendous meaning to people, and the recognizing the impact or the ripple effect of your words and actions is probably one of the greatest awarenesses that you have for that. It's an awesome responsibility for leaders of all capacities, churches, schools, governments, organizations, everything. It's huge.
Oh, absolutely. And you could probably remember, a time when someone that you considered an authority figure or an important person in your life said something to you and crushed you, They may not have even been aware they said it.
Yeah. I have so many examples of this, and it's a lot of it too. This was what's fascinating about human beings too, is we hold on to stuff that happened to us as kids.
Oh,
And we
absolutely.
tend to carry that forward, and that little kid inside is making decisions as an adult now.
Wow.
I remember specifically teachers who said things that were just probably normal to them, but they were devastating to a child. And literally through personal development and working through that stuff, I've been able to release that, but I didn't even realize what was making those decisions. That brings me to another question, though, that just came to me is, as maybe, for lack of a better word, influencees or followers of a leader, do you have is there a way to check ourselves from elevating someone too high on a pedestal?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And when we're committed to following someone, we put ourselves in a potentially vulnerable spot because, we, I guess by default, do elevate them to a certain degree. And if they do or say something to us that we perceive as being judgmental or negative or even incorrect about us, that can really hurt. So I think that's a really great question because you know what? They're going to do it. There's no doubt about it. Not because they want to, but they're human. They're not perfect. Life is not perfect. Life will deal out its share of blows to us. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to then sort of reflect on, what we're drawing our identity from. Because if all our identity comes from one single person, we're probably putting ourselves in a dangerous spot. So I think that's the first key, is to just check that, this person is not becoming almost like a deity kind of figure to us, and there is life and perspective outside of them. I think it also opens up the opportunity for us to really grow, because I know myself, people that I've followed, they offend me. They hurt me. They misjudge me. They do all these horrible things to me, not because they've intentionally done it, but just because that's life. That's relationships. That's going to happen. That's the chance for me to grow through that. So I can get offended. I can cut the relationship. I can change the way I'm relating to them, all that sort of stuff. And I think this is where, particularly relationships of leaders and followers, that's where they really get tested, is, and that's for anyone, families or anything like that. When there's offense and we can work through that offense and we can forgive, even if they don't know we're forgiving them because they don't know they've done anything wrong, that's where the relationships go to a new level. Because I'm sure that vice versa, I would offend them and do stuff that drives them crazy. But, you mentioned that word before about grace, where there's a grace towards each other. And we talk about this in the book about, that's a real key to making a relationship work, is being able to say, you know what, you're not perfect. This hurt. Let's keep moving forward. And I don't have an expectation that you're going to be perfect. So let's just keep moving together.
Yeah. It's sometimes just a powerful conversation to clean it up.
Absolutely.
And move forward does all the trick. Yeah. Your book has done such a great job. And I just want to mention too, for our listeners, if you're interested in reading the book, it's not a fluff piece. And that's what I really loved about it, Michael, because I like to get into the nitty gritty, and you have the 10 keys, but it's not just, integrity is important to leadership. Moving on to number 2, it wasn't like that. You got in depth with it, gave specific examples. And then I want to talk about your last chapter here in a second, but I think it's going to be important after this conversation already that we mention at least what these 10 keys are. And I've been thinking about how we could possibly do that without just going off of a list. So I wondered if I could bring up what the key is, and if you could just maybe give us a little insight into why it's important.
Sure.
quickly. I don't want you to have to go as in depth as your book does, but I think those who are listening, if they're on the road right now, these are real practical things that they can integrate into their life right now. So does that work for you?
Let's give it a go. Let's roll the dice.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with your first key. It's integrity. What do you have to say on integrity?
Well, look, I think people, whether they're in Australia or whether they're in America, they have a built-in BS detector. So if we don't do what we say, then we've automatically reduced our capacity to lead them. And they will probably never tell you they don't believe you, but they'll tell you by how well they respond to you and how much they let you influence them. So, if we're not doing what we say we're going to do in the little things, we'll never get any trust or buy-in from people in the big things.
That's so true. And I love that you mentioned that they'll probably never mention it to you. So I think sometimes it may not even be a conscious decision on their part. There's just a feeling or a disconnect that says this person's not doing, they pick up the inconsistency. He said this, but he's doing this, and they just move on to something else.
Way to say it, inconsistency. Yeah, that's a good one.
Second one, conviction of purpose.
Well, you mentioned this at the outset, which is a great point. It's the why. Why are we doing this? If we're doing something and it's causing us pain, and we don't know why, we're going to stop. But if we've got our why, like you're doing meditation, building yourself up to, like, that's not something you do if you don't have a why. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
you have got your why sorted, because anyone else is doing that going, I'm just not going to do it because it's too hard. Like, I don't want to go there. It's easier to sit on the couch and watch the TV than get up at 6 a.m. and psych myself up to talk to some stranger about a book they wrote. Like, that's hard work, right? But you know what your why is. So that's exactly the example of how you're going to push through those limitations. And that's the inspiration to pull you through those barriers. Inspiration, that word comes from in spirit. So it's pulling us on the inside forward. And that's, if we don't have that, we're going to stop when it gets hard.
Tell me about your book in that regard. I think a lot of people think a book is too hard and not worth it. How did you get through that? Was it your conviction of purpose?
I think, because I found the book really, really hard, and it took me 12 years to write it by the time I started collecting on my notes and stuff. And I went through a number of edits and that sort of thing. And I just kept thinking, at the end of the day, this is going to be a powerful catalyst to help people and to help them on their journey. And I know the stuff in it is real and powerful. So for me, it was all about, I've got to get to the finish line. Like, I've got to get this done. Because I'm not, it's like an itch you can't scratch. It's like something burning on the inside of you, a burr in your undies, that you've got to get this thing done, or it's just not going to be a happy life for you. So that was the vision for me.
I love it. And well, that brought us right to number 3 too, is the vision. So conviction of purpose, and then your vision on what you're trying to create.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you want to add to vision?
Yeah, and look, we just sort of mentioned that about, it's something that we can connect to that's in the future, and it's pulling us forward. Motivation is about kind of pushing, but inspiration is about pulling. So when we can anchor ourselves to the vision in the future, all those hurdles and roadblocks and obstacles in the way, it's pulling us through those. So it's a really powerful dynamic to have operating in our life.
What advice do you have to people who think having a vision statement or an idea of where they're going is a little too woo-woo and not worth the time of creating? What advice do you have for them on that?
Look, I think the vision statement and that sort of thing is great. It's ultimately only as powerful as you make it. So you can write something and stick it on the shelf or stick it on the mirror, But if there's no power in that for you, then it's not a magic bullet. But it's when we're daily looking at that, declaring it, believing it, dedicating time to reaching it, we're upskilling ourselves in the things we need to do to get there. We're making that a priority and a living thing in our life. That's when vision becomes powerful. If it's just someday I'll do this, and we're sort of disconnected from it, it's kind of a nice idea. It's not really a vision.
I love what you said there. The when it becomes a living part of your life and you integrate it into your life, that's where the real power comes. For me, also, I have a vision statement that I read or write. Sometimes I'll just write it out every day, and it's using words and painting a picture that charges me up. I mean, I literally get so excited writing it, that I have to. My brain goes crazy, and I have to bring myself down to focus it. And I think that has really served me. That powerful of a statement. It's hard to teach that because most people go straight to money. Oh, I'm going to have $1 million in the bank, or I want to make $100,000 a year. But it doesn't go deep enough. You know, you got to dig a little deeper into what's really motivating you and what's charging you up for that.
So how long would you spend sort of doing that exercise?
So it depends on where I'm at and what I'm working on, but it's a good 40 to 45 minutes.
Wow.
Because I leave time out for what I call staring at the wall. Because if I'm writing it, I'm visualizing how I'm visualizing my next steps. What's my day going to look like today to make that happen? Wow. And I kept away from pipe dreams. I keep it really like within probably 12 to 18 months, this vision. Then I have a higher vision statement of what my overall life is. And they all kind of click in together. And so you mentioned that taking action every day on your vision, that to me is the key as well. It can't be a pipe dream, right? You've got to be moving towards it. It has to be closer to real every single day. And that's why one of my favorite things I say is don't let the sun set without taking a step towards your dream, because that gives you a confidence that is indescribable, knowing that the work I did today is moving me closer to a higher vision or a dream life.
That is so good. Like one of the biggest things that I think I've found with vision is that I can become disconnected from it, and I get bogged down in the daily grind and paying the bills and doing this job and working here and fixing that and doing this and dropping the kids off and and all of a sudden the vision is like, it's like, what is that? I can hardly remember what it is, but that process that you're talking about, wow, that is a great way to keep that alive and fresh and connection with it. Yeah, I love that.
And it's a little more intense than a lot of the times you might have time for. But I've also found that using technology to remind me of the vision helps too. Setting a reminder during the day, like when I was in my full hustle mode and I was doing like 12 mobile notary assignments, I was creating a course, I was YouTubing, I had this book idea. My day was full, but I could find 10 minutes in between appointments or while I was eating to review my vision statement. And I would put it on my calendar. Review your vision statement. So if I can't sit there for 45 minutes and write and feel it, I can at least read it and feel it. And that was really powerful for me.
That's brilliant.
So let's talk about the next key, prioritizing relationships. I love that you included this in there.
Yeah, look, and that's what we've been talking about before is, we can lead organizations and battleships and communities and countries, but ultimately all we're ever leading is people. So we've got to make prioritizing relationships a real key, because, if we're not relating to people, our ability to influence and connect and engage and lead them drops dramatically. So when they can't hear our heart, when we can't hear their concerns, thoughts, ideas, energy, there's no transfer, there's no connection. It's like, the connection with our vision. If there's no actual dynamic of connecting with each other, they're kind of like strangers. They're robots. And, I've seen the corporate world, people in positions of authority, just some do it really well, some do it really badly, where their employees are kind of like appliances. You send them instructions and they do a job and they're finished. And there's just no connection there. And so those people respond accordingly, and they do the bare minimum. They tick the box, and then that's all they're prepared to do. Because there's no engagement with a vision. They're not, passionate about anything, because they never get any input about that stuff from the people around them. So we've got to connect and engage with people. And I think the other thing just on that is this balance between performance and relationships. Like, we all want to get results and we all want to get outcomes. But if we burn the people in the process of doing that, I don't see that as a successful outcome. So maintaining the relationship, working through the offence, long-term, staying and sticking, supporting that person on the way to outcomes, that's a great result.
I totally agree with you. And I think it's a different result. And sometimes there's a short-term sacrifice because relationships do take a little bit of time. You got to fumble around a little bit, figure each other out.
Yeah, more people, more problems. Yeah,
exactly.
We're strange creatures, us people.
We are bizarre creatures, but totally worth it too. The investment you make in the relationship, it pays off in the end in ways that I don't think you plan on or you can measure in the same way as on a profit and loss statement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about persistence. I did not realize that it took you 12 years to write your book. That's persistence.
That's right.
What else do you have on persistence?
Yeah, look, this is an interesting one. I think this is where it's really important that we measure, we can measure the external outcome. I've got X amount of dollars in the bank. I've finished and published the book. And that's good. But I think the other thing that really helps persistence, persistence, sometimes it's just about showing up, right? Like we make mistakes, we cop a beating, things don't go our way, we get hammered in life, and just showing up and putting the shoulder back to the wheel, man, that's a great characteristic to develop in our life.
It's hard to do, I think, because especially like for me, I had 26 businesses that failed before my notary business. I'm not sure that persistence was my conscious thoughts. I think there's a little bit of foolishness. There's a little bit of ignorance, but I just kept going, and I'm so glad that I did. But do you have a recommendation for somebody who maybe did try something, flopped, failed, quit too early? How can they get back on the horse again?
Well, look, one of the things I found when I was writing the book, I had these people in history that I was always a fan of, and I've started to research them to include a story of them in the book. And what amazed me was how many times they failed before they had any sort of success. And it was like just a consistent theme through pretty much everyone that I've included in the book is what a tough journey they had to make it, and we look at them and we see the big name and the kind of success, and we think, wow, they just woke up one day and that happened. But, for a lot of them, it was years, decades upon decades of pain and failure and disappointment before they had any measure of making it. So, look, it was just such a kind of revelation to me, and it was really refreshing, and it took the pressure off to think, I've got to do this tomorrow. Because you know what?
Right.
Barely anyone makes it in a day. It is a journey of ups and downs, and it's not an easy path.
Definitely not. Do you think in today's modern age, do you think social media, because sometimes we see just the light rainbows and unicorns part, do you think that impacts people's willingness to take a risk today in entrepreneurialism or leadership?
Oh, look, I think absolutely that is a big key. I mean, you talk about Facebook. Someone started the program in their garage at uni, and now they run the world, and it's easy as that, right? That's what happens to everybody.
Piece of cake.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I just think that even the concept of failure, if we have the wrong mindset towards failure, then it can just stop us dead. And I think today's generation, I think maybe that's one thing we talk about resilience in the younger generation and that sort of thing. The ability just to keep going. Some of my favourite examples of great leadership are people that have just been through a really tough time. They've had a lot of family issues and things outside their control and financial pressure, and just to see them keep showing up and keep stepping up to the plate and keep leading, I think, wow, that's someone that I can follow because they're in it. It's not like, oh, this is getting a bit tough, I'm out of here, I'm looking for the next opportunity. It's like, no, they've been beaten and bashed and run over and all this stuff, and they're still there showing up. So that's someone that is like laying a foundation stone in the ground.
I think hearing stories like that, I love hearing stories like that, but I think that's why we relate to them so well. We are all going through some shit.
Yeah.
One way or the other, right?
Yeah.
Going through something. And when somebody shares that with us, it's relatable and they kept going. I think that's the biggest inspiration. So let's talk about number 6, leading for legacy. What do you mean by that?
Well, the reality is that everything here is temporary, right? So we have a limited lifespan. And the question that we really never really consider is what's going to happen when I'm gone? And if I'm doing all this stuff today, what's the future of that? Does it end with me, or am I building into the next generation? So, legacy, it's a bit different from inheritance. Legacy sort of has more of the intangibles built into it rather than like a dollar figure or a material possession or something like that. So, someone who starts a business, they've put their heart and soul into it. They run it a certain way. They've got certain values, certain blueprints, certain DNA, certain way of dealing with customers, certain principles. What happens if there's a new manager come in and run that business tomorrow because we're not there? Does all that suddenly change because that person's got a different set of values? So they're the sorts of things that I think now that we know the end point is not going to, it's temporary. We can start today building for tomorrow, So the chapter talks about finding people that can continue the legacy after we're gone. And they're a certain type of individual. It's not a corporate recruitment program of succession, because as talented as someone might be, or as someone with as good a history in a certain job function, doesn't mean they've got our DNA and doesn't mean that they've got the same values or way of operating that we do. So it's really about, if we want to continue what we've built in our time here, we need to start preparing for that today and preparing people to take that role on tomorrow.
That I love that you included this as one of the 10 keys, because I think this probably gets thought about the least out of all these 10 keys is, how are we going to be remembered when we're gone, and who's going to carry that on?
Yeah. So, and look, we're all busy flat out hanging onto the saddle doing our own stuff. We're all racing to our own finish line. And even the concept of, picking up the baton from someone else who's, maybe a previous generation to us that's gone ahead of us. Part of this journey of legacy can be picking up their baton and carrying on what they've started. It doesn't always have to start with us. We can be we can be a carrier, and we can pass it on as well. It's always it's like a generational concept.
Love it. Which brings us to number 7, selfless service.
Yeah, well, I sort of touched on it before that some of the greatest leaders are the greatest servants. We love the image of being the leader and sitting at the top of the pyramid and having people fan us and bring us caviar and grapes and all that sort of stuff, and having all control over everything. It's a wonderful dream. I go there sometimes in my own mind. But look, the reality is the greatest leaders are the greatest servants. And some of the examples I talk about in the book are people that were successful in business and successful in creating wealth, but just the way that they served their nation and their community by putting that back into families and society and that sort of thing, that separates them from people that are good business people. It elevates them to a new level. We talked about relationships before, where if it's all about me and my relationships with people, then they're going to be a certain level of relationship, because if it's all about me and I'm selfish in those relationships, then people will respond to me appropriately. But where I can serve someone else in that relationship, it's going to take on a different dynamic, and it's going to elevate it to a different level. So there's nothing glamorous about service. It's about almost setting your own agenda aside to serve the needs of others, and that's kind of hard. I don't do that naturally. Maybe you do, Bill, but that's hard. So you've got to really develop that quality, I think.
I think so too. Well, number one, I think we are. Oh, and I promised I would stop saying number one. That's my most common podcast term. I'm going to stop saying that. So for me, with selfless service, I think you have to adopt an abundant mindset first. I think that really
what do you mean by that?
Like a true belief that there is enough for everyone, right, and they can have their own success and what it means. Wow. When I worked on it for a while. It's been introduced to me. I'm grateful to have a mother that taught that and introduced me to books and teachers that taught abundance. But until it's integrated, I don't think you fully appreciate it. So for me, it had been ingrained for a while. It became a belief. And when I truly believe that there's enough for everybody, it's a lot easier to serve others, because I don't have there's no fear attached to it. So I think that served me really well. So that would be a gift, I think, that helps in that process.
Fantastic. And I think that sort of opens up that whole concept of, we live in a very transactional world. We buy and sell, we give and take. Giving lives in some other dimension outside of that. But it's like when we can give of ourselves, whether it's time or energy or in service to others, in some way, it opens up a new dimension of being able to receive other things as well. It's outside of that transactional buy and sell kind of framework.
I totally agree. And there's something that happens. There's a shift that happens that makes way for receiving. I can't put my finger on the science of it, right? I can't go and say, oh yeah, if you give this, then this is what's happening. Right. And this magnet for other stuff. I don't have that down yet. So it sounds a little woo-woo, but all I have is my own experience. And whenever I give, and this is, I share this with my audience too. One of the ways that I was able to really grow my business is to send a greeting card or a thank you card or a thinking of you card or something every day. And the people who received those loved it. It changed, like they would call, some of them would be in tears. It just landed at the right time. That felt good. but starting my day, sending that card, giving that card out, that made me, without them even receiving it, it changed my energy for the day. It just made me feel good. So I think there's something magical that's not really magic about it, right?
Yeah,
It just it shifted me.
Yeah,
Really
fantastic.
powerful stuff.
That's brilliant.
So let's get into number 8, the pioneering spirit. And this I love. I love blazing my own trail. So I love that you included pioneering spirit here.
Yeah, well, look, every environment we're in, whether it's a family or workplace or community, it has a particular culture. It has a certain way of operating. And when we carry a pioneering spirit, what it means is that those things that we don't align with our values, it's like we're not prepared to just tolerate them. It's like we got to go somewhere new. We've got to go somewhere that we're not currently at. And it's like we're the pioneer in the jungle with the machete, and we're hacking a new path, a new destination to get somewhere that no one's ever been before. So it's about breaking through those limitations, even in our own thinking and our own life, that have always held us in a certain place. You know, our own life has a certain culture. Our business has a culture. Our family has a culture. So when we can break out of those things, not in a destructive, negative way, but there's, might be a limiting factor around, maybe someone in your family's never been to university. You'll never go to university. When we're a pioneer, we go, you know what? I'm going to university and I'm going to get there. And it's something that we just can't tolerate the status quo. And we're prepared to upset the furniture and rattle the cage and change the way stuff happens. And that's kind of like, we're not just administrating, we're not just managing, we're not just going through the motions. We're pioneering a path that's new and fresh and alive, and hang on to the coattails because we're going there together.
Yeah. I love that. It's one of my favorite ones. And that brings us right into number 9 with breakthrough thinking. What do you mean by breakthrough thinking? How is it different from pioneering spirit?
Well, breakthrough thinking is like, if you imagine our mind as a garden, by default, that garden is going to have weeds. We don't plant them, we don't invite them, we don't buy them, but they're going to show up in the garden. So in our mind, those weeds are like the negativity, the limiting thoughts, the barriers that prevent us from believing that we can do it. So we've got to actively tend to that garden, and we've got to plant positive thoughts, which are the flowers and the fruit trees and the things that bear a harvest for us. And we've got to weed out those weeds. We've got to uproot them. We've got to deal with them, because if we don't, they're going to take over. So in our mind as a garden, that negativity is just by default at work in us. We talked again about your practice of going through your preparation to get ready for these podcasts. It's almost like you're tending to the garden in your mind, right? It's like you're pulling out those weeds, right, and you're planting those positive seeds, and you're picking the harvest, and it's like you're cleaning the place up. And that's exactly what it's like in our mind. So breakthrough thinking is all about not just settling for the default thoughts that we have, because just because they're in our head doesn't mean they're ours. We've got the right to pull them out and chuck them out and get rid of them and replace them with something else. So one of the exercises in the book say, people don't believe that you can think whatever you want to think. But if I were to say, don't think of a pink elephant walking through the jungle, and don't imagine he's got bananas coming out his ears, and don't imagine he's got fluffy blue slippers on. Well, guess what? You just thought that thought. So, we can think. We can think what we want to think. You can think, oh, I'm really scared about doing podcasts. Or you can think, this podcast is going to be great, and it's the reason why I'm doing this X, Y, and Z, because it's going to get me to my why. So we have a real opportunity in our thinking to break through the default setting in our mind. And that's kind of what breakthrough thinking is all about.
I absolutely love it. This is probably the most powerful of all the keys because it's the voice in your head and it's the voice you hear all day, every day. And I think we, I heard a quote. I probably heard it my whole life, but I was just ready to hear it. But it was, "Don't believe what you think."
Right.
Something along those. Don't believe everything you think.
Yeah, that's true.
Because we assume that everybody else is thinking the same thing, number one. So, but there are some things that are going through your head that are just a sum of all of your experiences, your perspective, and the lens that you've grown over your eyes and your mind over the years. And you can change it. You can change your thoughts. You can weed it out. And I love that you said that your mind is a garden, and that's exactly what it is. And it needs tending to. We can't just default.
Yeah.
Powerful. Which brings us to our number 10. And I think they're probably pretty closely aligned. Self-governance.
Yeah, this is a nasty one because it's all about us and it's kind of uncomfortable. But basically the premise is that we can't lead. We don't really have the right, or we don't have the ability to lead other people until we can lead ourselves. And the hardest person we'll ever have to lead is us, our own self. Because, we're unruly. We've got opinions and we've got agendas and we've got ambitions and we've got all this stuff in us. So tempering that in our own life is kind of like a real, I guess that's kind of the benchmark of if we ever mature into a real authentic leader. It's being able to put ourselves second and put ourselves behind the bigger vision of the leadership mandate. And that's, to serve others and to put the bigger picture first. So this is a tough one because we've got our own self to deal with, and it's a tough competitor. It's easier not to forgive than to forgive. It's easier to sit on the couch than get up at 6 a.m. and prepare for a podcast. It's our own self is a constant kind of force in our own life, and we can't pretend that it's not. And if I guess I started at the start, I talked about who we are in private is how we lead in public, and there's things in our personal life, if there's things that are affecting us as an individual, that's going to play out in the public arena. So it's kind of the challenge, I guess, for all of us as humans and having our own kind of ambition and selfish nature and that sort of stuff is to connect with some values to override that, practice some self-discipline and have mentors around us to give us some feedback to go, yeah, I think you didn't do that too well. I think you're a bit selfish, or I think you acted out of anger in that occasion, and you sort of, to give us that check. All these things are things we can utilize to keep ourselves in check and keep ourselves accountable so that, when we're in that leadership role, which we all are every day anyway, we've been tuned a bit. We've been moved a little bit closer to the plumb line than if we just would let ourselves go unchecked.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be one of the hardest for a lot of people. And I think why so many resist even the idea of personal development or personal growth. Because when you look at a mirror and you see results in your life and who's ultimately responsible for those, this was a really hard lesson for me as I was going through those.
Oh, that's horrible. That's a horrible thought, Bill. Stop it.
It's really tough. I had I was running like 5 or 6 different little enterprises, like all of them crumbled all at the same time, broke up in a terrible way in a relationship. My world was crashing. And I said, what is the deal? Why did these, who can I was really looking for somebody to blame, right? Like who's responsible for all of these failures? And it came right back to me. I was the
Wow.
common denominator through all of those. I made those choices, and it
powerful.
sucks. Yeah, it
Wow.
sucks looking at that. But if I hadn't have looked at that, I would have just been this constant victim of serial entrepreneurship and shiny object syndrome. I had to stop and look at it. And while it sucked temporarily, it changed my life completely, stepping into that courage to look at that. So for those that...
Can you tell me about the shiny object syndrome?
I certainly can. So for me, I love a good idea. I rarely meet an idea I don't love. I'm a number 7 on the Enneagram. I just love, I'm the enthusiast. So I'm just like, oh, that's a great idea. Good idea. That's a great idea. And then I have this passion for business and this entrepreneurial spirit. So everything I do just turns into a business, a hobby. Right. Oh, I love doing this. I can make good money doing this. I have this collection of businesses that as soon as it gets too hard or something shinier, brighter, or cooler comes along, I would just kind of flit on to the next thing. And I had the results to prove that. I had 26 business failures, no assets, no income, relationships that were teetering. I was bullshitting myself, therefore bullshitting everybody else too. I loved the story of being an entrepreneur, but I wasn't digging deep enough to really be into it. Okay. That I call it my sacred weekend because it happened over Thanksgiving weekend when I had the realization. And I changed it. I mean, you can measure my life before that and after it, and it's two different experiences.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that was my experience with that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Thanks for asking. I want to now take a moment because I want to talk about affirmations. Because I think when affirmations are used well, they can be life-changing. And I think most people do not use them correctly. So they become almost pipe dreamish. But in your book, you give very specific affirmation statements to help people keep on track with each one of these 10 keys. Can you tell me what your experience is with affirmations, why you included those?
Yeah, look, and they're probably all born out of my own shortcomings, to be honest. So they're as specific and worded the way they are so that I can't find a loophole in them, basically. So they're kind of the areas that I've found, and I know other people have found that we can talk about we need to have good relationships. And we go, yep, sure, tick the box. But the affirmations, they're not really long, but they get into I'm prepared to forgive and I'm da-da-da-da and that sort of stuff. So that the real keys to making those concepts work are embedded in the affirmations. And I think the affirmations are a summary of everything that we've just spoken about here today, because they're reinforcing everything that we want to develop in our own life and in our own thinking, and all the positive, good, healthy, constructive things that we're trying to build in our life so that we can become. They're all the things that we need to connect with every day, as you've outlined through your practice of connecting with your vision, which was just brilliant. And I love the way that you've incorporated that into your life, because I know for me, if I had been more diligent with these, staying on track with these affirmations earlier in life, I probably would have avoided some of the pain I've experienced and some of the traps I've fallen into in the past.
Sure. I think that's why, going back to the 8th graders, I think we could change the world teaching stuff like this at an earlier age, and how to integrate those affirmations into life. For me, setting a reminder and actually like owning the affirmation. I couldn't, what didn't work for me, what I got from some of the other the books on affirmations is like, all right, you stick this sticky note on your mirror in the morning and you recite it 10 times and it changes your life. And it just never worked for me.
Yeah.
So I finally started dialing in and adapting affirmations to my life and to my
Wow.
vision and what I was trying to create. So I had to rewrite those, but then scheduling them throughout the day to remind yourself what you're moving towards. And I think that's the real power. And that's what I loved about your affirmations. They're so practical and they lead directly to whatever characteristic or whatever key you're trying to focus on for that particular day or that particular 6 months or year, whatever it is. It keeps you right on track for doing that. And you do it over and over and over until it's, you almost build a belief in yourself.
Right.
That that's who I am now.
Wow. That's a powerful point, because I think the way you said that is about, you bring it into your life. But for me, there's nothing in my life that says I'm an international best-selling author. There's nothing in my environment that tells me that. My job that I work in, I deal in numbers and I present reports in numbers. I don't have 100 books that I've read every day. I'm not a book guy. There's nothing else in the environment to inform me other than what I'm identifying with in my own mind and in my own beliefs to say, this is who I am, this is where I'm going, and this is my identity. So that's the only thing I've got, because if I don't have that, everything else around me tells me you're not.
What a powerful statement, but that's all you need is what's in your mind. And think about on the inverse or the other side of that, you have people who are surrounded by tokens of success, trophies, wealth, fancy cars, but their brain doesn't tell them they're a success. So they never feel successful. They never feel content or happiness in their life, even with all those outside treasures. So that just speaks to the importance of what is inside your brain.
Yeah. And just quickly in the book, I talk about some research that looks at smokers, and the smokers that go through the quit program and still identify as a smoker at the end of the program, the overwhelming majority go back to smoking. The ones that go through the program and identify as a non-smoker, they go, no, I'm not a smoker anymore. I'm a non-smoker. They are the ones that never go back to smoking. It's all about what's real to them and who they are.
That's an incredible demonstration.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
The power of a mind. And then look at you now, your book, Leadership Upgrade, 10 Keys to Becoming the Leader Your World is Waiting For, is now an Amazon best-selling book in over 15 categories. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, look, and I think that's the kind of the end point, but it's almost like, how can I explain it? The measurement of our success, I think we need to measure ourselves on the journey as well. So someone who wants to be a millionaire, the measure of that success might be reading a book to start. It's like the internal growth and the internal capacity to reach that goal is kind of just as an important measure as getting to the destination. So 25 years ago, deciding to take some notes about what I could put in a book, that's kind of just as important as getting to the end point of going, oh, now I've got a book.
I might even take it a little further, Michael, and say it's more important, but twice as important.
I'm going with it. I like it.
I think, again, it goes back to becoming. It's who we become along the way.
Wow. Yeah.
And the lessons we learn and the people that we meet along the way. I mean, you could not have written the book 25 years ago and have the impact that it's going to have now, because you didn't have 25 years of becoming and experiences and seeing the dark side of leadership and in the positive side of leadership, right? So I feel like it culminates for this. But I like that you brought it up too, because when I first published my book, I'm not sure what I consciously thought, but when I published it, I was blessed to get it to Amazon bestseller status as well. And then afterwards, I experienced what I learned later, like 18 months later, was that it was a bit of grief.
Yeah.
Like creative grief is what they called it. Have you experienced anything similar to this? Any unusual emotions after your book published?
Yeah, look, I can really relate to that. I think I was so focused on finishing it that, it consumes time every day, and you sort of make your schedule around it to get to that point. And then when you get it finished, there's kind of a gap and a hole there, and you think, oh, what do I do now? I've got an extra 2 hours a day.
Right.
What do I do?
Been working on this for 12 years
That's
and
right.
then you're done.
That's right. So, yeah, definitely. And I think it was almost like, you get to that point, and I remember Margaret Court, the tennis player, saying, the Australian tennis player, saying, when she won Wimbledon and she got to the number one in the world, which she'd been trying to get there her whole life, she got there and she felt completely empty. There's nothing there. But in her mind, she was chasing that so hard, as that's going to be when my life is a success. And then she got there and it was like just crickets.
Yeah. It's just a weird, strange feeling, but also a really valuable lesson too, in that it's all about the journey. I used to have posters that said, like, success is a journey, not a destination. And I'm like, somehow I bought into that, and I had posters on my wall that said it, but I didn't fully appreciate it until I think you pour your heart and vulnerability into a project. And I think vulnerability was a key factor there. As well. But when you release that out into the world, whether publicly or even in a personal journal, whatever it is, whatever that is, it was about the creation process, not about the publication process. I guess.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a really interesting area, and maybe it's a bit of a check for me that maybe I was putting too much value and too much weight on the book, as in the book has become some sort of mystical spiritual object that's going to guide my life. Right. But you know what, it's a book, and again, if we put too much weight on that stuff, it can create an imbalance in us, that we're chasing those shiny objects, as I've now learned what they are from you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing yourself and your wisdom and your book with our audience. If you're listening to this right now and you'd like to connect with Michael and get your own copy of Leadership Upgrade, visit www.sidehustlelounge.com/VIP. Join the free VIP room. I'll have a whole section just for Michael, his book, and some of his other resources as well, so you can get to know him a little bit. Michael, thanks again for being here.
Thanks heaps. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.